Hello, everyone. Welcome to the third session in CENTA's School Leader series. It's wonderful to see a large number of you already on the chat, and we are sorry that we are starting 2 to 3 minutes late today. And those of you who are attending our webinars regularly will know that it is quite rare for us to be 2 to 3 minutes late. However, our guest for the day, which is Mr. Amit Doshi from Lenovo, has a personal circumstance because of which he is going to be slightly delayed. And we will anyway get started with the discussion before that. So, first of all, to know our audience a little better, can I request everyone to put your school name, location name, and if you are in particular a school leader or say a principal, coordinator, HOD, etc. And of course, people who are not school leaders are also welcome to this series, though it is this particular series is specifically focused on school leaders. So would love to know which school you belong to, which location, and so on. So look forward to getting a little bit of that on the chat. Okay, we have somebody from Seth Anandram Jaipuria School in Kanpur, Miss Sumita Chatterjee. Welcome. Miss Uma Bharti from Navy Children's School, Coimbatore. Miss Kavita from EVPS. Okay, and we have now a lot of schools coming up here. I'm obviously not going to be able to read all of them, but great to see people from Jabalpur, from Delhi, from Guwahati, from Miapur, from Jaunpur, from Lucknow, Hyderabad. Great to see a retired diet principal from Andhra Pradesh, Gudipati Narayana. Welcome, sir. Great to see someone from Bhubaneswar, from Patna. Okay, so you can also see, with each other, somebody from Trichy. So from Shillong, okay, wonderful. I think even as I'm going through the chat, I can count at least 15 or 20 states represented already. And great to see the growing number of people who are joining these sessions and who are with us regularly. So today's session is specifically about the use of technology by school leaders. And I also want to emphasize that it is with respect to how technology can enable a school as a whole. So not just how technology can be used inside a classroom, which is of course a very, very important aspect of using technology. And we've run many webinars in the past on use of technology inside the classroom in various ways. But for today's webinar, we will not be focusing too much on the use of technology inside the classroom. We will be focusing a lot more on the use of technology for the school as a whole. Before we get started with the session, and again we are waiting for our main speaker, but okay, Amit is here right on time. So Amit, welcome. And as I was telling the audience, we have school leaders from 15 or 20 states with us already. We were just trying to take a quick check of which locations are represented. I have not read out all of them, but I read at least 15 or 20 states as my sense. And wonderful to have you here. So let me quickly introduce Amit Doshi to all of you. Amit is the Director of Marketing for India and South Asia at Lenovo and part of the leadership teams for both India and Asia Pacific at Lenovo. He is responsible for shaping the growth and goodwill or equity of Lenovo's brand portfolio and demand across all the lines of work, whether it is with consumers, with enterprises, with small and medium businesses. He also handles the tablet product. And prior to this, Amit has had an illustrious career as marketing manager at Britannia Industries, also holds a bachelor degree in computer science from Savitribai Phule Pune University, and a master's in business administration, MBA from Narsimonji Institute of Management, 2003 batch. So Amit, welcome to this session. Wonderful to have you here. And for those of you who are not aware, while I think almost everyone should know that Lenovo is a leading computer manufacturer globally. But for those of you who are not aware, Lenovo also plays a very significant role in the education sector with its products and solutions directed towards schools and other educational institutions. And in that context, we thought, who better than Amit to give us some inputs on how school leaders could be thinking about technology for their own schools. And as I mentioned earlier, today's session is the third in our school leaders series, and very specifically focused on school leaders, whether principals, coordinators, management, heads of department, etc., and how they think about technology as a whole. So Amit, welcome again.
Thank you, Ramya. I hope you can hear me clearly.
Yes.
A pleasure to be here.
Wonderful. So Amit, let me start with an open-ended question. In fact, I was just about to ask the audience a question, but we'll do that slightly later. Let me start with an open-ended question. Technology inside the classroom is understood a lot more. So we talk about videos, we talk about adaptive softwares, learning algorithms, etc. Technology at the school level, I feel, is understood much less. And as someone who has seen this very closely, what would you think are some of the big areas of technology that a school leader should be looking at or can be looking at in today's world?
That's a great question, Ramya. And while I've had the opportunity of looking at the space very closely over the last 1 year or so, especially, I don't again claim to be an absolute expert. We, as a company, are still trying to understand the evolution that the space is going through post pandemic. We are fortunate that we had quite a few solutions already to offer to our customers, to educational institutes, etc. But we are also, as I said, learning as we go. So what I'll share today are more reflections, are more learning. I don't think it is definitive in nature, as the space is complex and ever evolving. So with that, I would say, look, I mean, I can empathize with educators and educational institutes because they've had to almost adapt to the situation almost overnight. And when companies undergo their digital transformation, it takes them experts, it takes them years of planning and many more years of implementation. So if you were to apply that thinking to educational institutes, one can only relate to how difficult or how complex would it have been and continues to be. I think as the one of the founding philosophies that we at Lenovo India are really looking at very closely is to say that classroom schools and classrooms may reopen again if, let's say, the pandemic were to subside, but classrooms will never be the same again. They have changed forever, and they will be very different from the classrooms of the pre-pandemic era. And to even get to what kind of things educational institute should be looking at, I think the first thing we did was to first ask educators, ask teachers. More importantly, we asked students. Very recently, we ran a scholarship program with one of the largest media houses in the country, and we reached out to kids and we asked them, what is it that you think is your experience of online learning, and what do you think we should as adults try and do about it? Because I mean, think of the kids, just invert and think of the kids. They've not had any opportunity to tell us. They were just subject to this world we created. And interestingly, we've got almost 30,000 entries from across the country, where kids from grade 5 to grade 12 have either written back to us in form of a presentation or a video or an essay. And what comes through very clearly is they, even kids at very young kids, they're very quick to understand the benefits of the education they're going through right now. So they tell us it's flexible, they tell us it can reach more people, people can learn at their own pace, so on and so forth. But the things that they talk about, things that can actually improve, are things like infrastructure. And infrastructure at home, of course, at they have limited view of infrastructure at schools, but infrastructure for themselves. Second is about engagement, about really being able to connect with what is being taught, about being able to connect with fellow students and be able to learn in a classical class, what was possible in a classical classroom environment, how do you replicate that in a hybrid environment? And the third thing that came up loud and clear was actually about mental well-being, which caught us by surprise as well. And when we look at the kind of solutions that we think of, the educational institutes need to think of three or four things. The first and foremost, I would say, is security and safety. If you suddenly have students in a very distributed, diverse technology environment, and that's the first thing we've got to do, is to is to make sure that digital identities are protected, the data is secure, and the online environment is safe for the educators and the students. That's really the big one. The second one that I think institute should think about is how is it that they will navigate this hybrid environment, where either students could be in classroom, or some of them could be in classroom, some of them could be remote, or all of them could be remote. And the situation may keep swinging like a pendulum. How does your technology provide the flexibility to be able to navigate these multiple situations? So that's the second one. The third thing that bodies must reflect on is, are they well placed to make sure that there is enough engagement and interaction that is happening? Are kids really, are students really engaged with the technology, with the methodology, with the pedagogy, with the content that is going out there? And therefore it is no longer the educator, but educator and technology are working hand in hand, and both of them have an equal role to play in driving learning outcomes and impact. And finally, how do you there's so much data that's going to be generated. I mean, imagine a classroom of 45 children, and imagine the amount of data that gets generated. uh, just in one classroom session, you could be looking at, hey, how many of them were really engaged, how many of them interacted, how many of them participated. And suddenly educators are also going to face this. On one hand, you could look at it as deluge of data, but on the other hand, you could actually look at it as an opportunity to use analytics in a very interesting way to manage learning within a classroom. So these four things, I would say, one is the first is security, the second is managing the hybrid nature of things, the third is making sure interaction, engagement is there, and the fourth is, can you use data and analytics in a really smart way to make sure that you're on top of learning outcomes. So that's a slightly long-winded answer to your question, Ramya, but it's just suddenly opened up so many dimensions.
That's fantastic, Amit. In fact, you also summarized it really nicely, so I didn't have to sort of repeat that, and very well put. I wanted to pick on one specific thing which you said, which is the interaction between the educator and technology, and you said that it's not either or; it's a blend between the educator and the technology, and that's something that resonates very well with us at CENTA, because we firmly believe that technology is never going to replace teachers or school leaders, but teachers and school leaders who are able to use technology are likely to do far better than those who are missing that capability fundamentally. So just wanted to add to that. As Lenovo, which of these areas are you specifically working on, and can you share a little bit about maybe even a few examples, or a little bit about what exactly does Lenovo do in this space with schools?
So if you look at the diversity of the space, we are trying to actually address all challenges and trying to make an impact in this space. Now, Lenovo has traditionally been a stronghold in the hardware and devices, IT devices space, and that I don't have to explain, drives so much of the education and has driven so much of education over the years. Whether you talk about laptops or tablets, or and now we for the last 5 odd years, 5 plus years, we've also had our presence in the infrastructure space, so we can provide server and storage solutions as well. So one is, this whole space of devices and hardware, where Lenovo has been present and has been traditionally very strong. We're the number one PC brand in the country. If you look at India, sorry, number one PC brand in the world. If you look at in India, we're the number one tablets brand, and we're making a very, very strong ramp up in the infrastructure space as well. But what's really exciting us is this whole area of software and dedicated solutions. So globally and in India, we've created a dedicated education team. Now, this education team tries to go to educational institutes, understand their problems end to end, and provide a comprehensive solution, right from devices to infrastructure to services, software, and solutions. Let me give you a few instances. Now, our B2B educational solutions can actually address all the four needs that I spoke to you about. So it's a suite of software and services that can ensure that you're able to run your learning in a safe and secure environment. You're able to engage students. You're able to manage this always changing hybrid environment, and finally make sure that you have dashboards and analytics at your disposal to see how children are learning. And that's like an end-to-end solution that we have. We call it Lenovo Smart Classroom Solutions. So that's what you can leverage if you are on premise or off premise. Now, if you are, let's say, running classrooms, we of course have hardware and smart classroom equipment that can aid learning. Now, if you shift focus a little bit to how educational institutes run their IT, uh, there are two ways of doing it. You could do it yourself, and that applies to any corporation, any company. You could either do it to yourself, or you could actually outsource it to someone else. Now, if our customers want, we can also do that. We can make sure that we take over their IT operations and provide it as a managed service, so that the schools and colleges and universities can go back to focusing on their core, which is actually to teach, and to make sure that there are learning outcomes, and be free in their mind about managing their IT requirements. And finally, all of this we're able to package in very, very creative commercial route. So if, let's say, capital expenditure an issue for an educational institute, we understand that, and we can convert all of this IT investment into very, very easy subscription plans, which we call as a service. So if there is a requirement that an educational institute has, we're very happy to whiteboard with them and work with them, and help propose a solution that can meet their learning needs. So that's on the B2B side. Now, if you come on the consumer side, that's another interesting area as well. Now, a lot of us there, of course, India has two kinds of hemispheres that we live in. The first is a place where the privileged few who have access to devices, who have access to laptops, and there we're looking really at improving experience. And then the second is the part where there is a digital divide, which we're trying to bridge through our corporate initiatives and make sure that kids who don't have access to devices, hardware, can we partner some organizations and make sure that they have access to. But let's talk about for a minute with people who, kids and parents who are able to provide access to devices. No longer is it important. So of course, there's a, hey, it's got to be a great laptop. You need a great camera. You need great audio. All of that is there. But we've gone a step beyond to understand what is it that children really need in this kind of an environment, and we've been able to, in a safe and secure way, we're able to bring in software solutions as time passes by. You'll see services and software where, for example, if you the system can gently nudge you and ask you to pay attention, or if you are getting too close, or if you spend too much time with the screen, it's able to alert you and tell you, hey, you've spent too much time, why don't you take a break, take your eyes off the screen for some time. Or if the child is talking, how do you cancel out noise in the background, and even without headphones. So we're deeply studying what is a home learning environment like, and what does it require, and how does a computer, how does a laptop, how does a tablet need to evolve to provide these very, very unique experiences to the child, to make sure that they learn well from home. So that's the journey we've been on. Very, very different from providing better specs and better hardware and better speeds. It's just evolved into something very, very different.
No, that's extremely interesting, and frankly, I was myself not aware of this range of work by Lenovo in this space. So very interesting to hear about that, and also more broadly to hear about the possibilities for teachers and school leaders in the current environment. Before we take a couple of audience questions, and I have been noting them down, but before we take a couple of audience questions, I'm going to run a quick poll for the audience. And by the way, meanwhile, welcome to Ola Jide Kehinde from Nigeria. Whenever I see people from outside India joining us, I do a special shout out. So welcome to you. So please go to www.menti.com, www.menti.com, and type the code 47833115. You can also see this on the screen, www.menti.com, and type the code 47833115. So you will find over there a multiple choice question. You can go to it from your phone or just another tab on your current device, browser, whatever that is, laptop or phone, and you will find a question over there. You can start answering the question if you are there already. So the question is, as a school leader, what do you use technology for most in your school? And I'm just going to forcibly ask you to pick one option, even though you could be using it for many purposes, but the one place where you use it the most. And this question actually has 7 different options, which are inside the classroom, for videos, learning apps, etc., for lesson planning and sharing, for interaction among teachers and students, for interaction with parents, for assessments, for administration, that is fees, scheduling, etc., for in-depth data analytics. So these are all the options that you will see in this question, and will request all of you to pick any one option from there. I'll give you another 30 seconds to answer before we move to the next question. Quite a lot of people have answered already. Give you another 30 seconds. I'm not sharing the results right now. We'll just run through 3 questions and then we'll see the results together. Okay. I know everyone has not answered, and sometimes it takes people a little bit of time to go to the site. But in the interest of time, since we have a lot to cover in the webinar, I'm moving forward to the next question. So the next question is, in which of the following areas would you like to most increase your use of technology? And the same 7 areas again, which you saw in the previous question. So the previous question is, where do you use it most as of today? The next question is, where would you like to increase the use of technology the most? So you may not be using it as much as you would like today, but where would you like to increase that use? Okay, again, since we are crossing 200 responses, I'm just going to stop it right now. Apologies again to the people who could not answer. Let's go to the third question. What are the top 2 bottlenecks that you face in the use of technology in your school? So this time you can pick 2 choices. So it will allow you to pick 2 choices. The top 2 bottlenecks. The options are teachers and school leaders not trained, parents not comfortable with it, students not comfortable with it, available products have many gaps, or we believe in keeping technology minimal. So what are your top 2 bottlenecks as of today in increasing the use of technology in your school? And again, I'll just wait for us to cross 200 responses and close it. I think in the last question, by the time I closed it, we hit more than 250 responses. That's great. So again, we have crossed 200 responses already, and I'm going to, okay, let me just give 5 seconds more. Okay, we are getting close to 300 responses now. I'm just going to stop it now. So with that, let me share my screen for all of you and Amit to see see what we are learning from this very quick poll. So you can see the first question that we had. As a school leader, what do you use technology for most in your school? And you can see that the first answer inside the classroom obviously got the maximum number of responses, which is well understood. However, there are a couple of other areas where many of you have started using technology. So for interaction among students and teachers, for in-depth data analytics, for assessments. So good to see that. And I think some of you have figured that you can still answer. That's also good. Let me show you the answers to the next question. So interestingly, in the next question, you actually find that uh, naturally, since many of you are already using it a lot inside the classroom, that's not the area that, I mean, that continues to be an area of priority for some, for quite a few. But other areas of priority which are coming up are interaction among teachers and students, which many of you are not using technology for too much today. Assessments comes up as a very big difference between what you are using today versus where you would like to use technology a lot more. Maybe data analytics or lesson planning and sharing as a third potential area. Let's go to the top 2 bottlenecks. So the top 2 bottlenecks, uh, in fact, the number one by a small margin is that available products have many gaps. So I think that's That's a great input for the big players to see what could be interesting ways to solve that, or for that matter, products which may not be known fully in the school segment. But two other gaps which are pretty much at par are teachers, school leaders, and parents not being comfortable with technology. So, and again, I'm stopping sharing my screen right now. But we also did uh, similarly a very large survey some time back, and I think we had about 1,000 schools responding to that in a short time. And one of the biggest inputs that came for players in technology was how do they combine sufficient training and support for school leaders and teachers in terms of how to use the technology. And I think that's something that's coming up again now. Parents is the other stakeholder where the training becomes even harder because they are not like a captive audience as in school. So training becomes even harder. But let me actually go back to Amit with that question. And I'm also seeing that question quite a lot on the chat, saying some of us learned by trial and error and we've struggled a lot and been frustrated, or teachers have become more comfortable, but parents are not comfortable. And that's a comment that has come from multiple people: Shahi Siddiqui, Sejal Patil, Nirmala ji. So Shalini, multiple people saying the same thing. So, Amit, any thoughts on, as a technology player, and this may not just be for Lenovo, but as a provider of solutions, what are some ways in which teachers, school leaders, and parents can start getting more comfortable with the solution? And then I'll also come back to some more in-depth questions on the use of tech itself.
Yeah, Ramya, that's a great question, and it is a barrier in adoption of technology, no doubt. And look, I don't have any really magic pills, because it's ought to be a journey, and as more and more people try new solutions, people get more comfortable using it. Is when the adoption will improve and word of mouth will improve about the simplicity of technology. So I think it has to be, what is clear is that, yeah, an educational institute could invest in a certain technology, or a brand like ours could sell a certain technology to a customer. But unless and until the teachers, the parents, the students don't really embrace it, it's not going to be successful. They're eventually the end users. So how do we, also include them in the journey is paramount, and not to think of it just as a transaction of a company selling IT, and another entity buying IT. But how do you get, and again, if you think of it in I'm trying to draw parallels from digital transformation that happens in companies, uh, where large scale IT transformation happens. It takes sometimes a year, 2 years, 3 years for users to get comfortable, and it all happens through a committed training calendar, task forces that are there to manage these IT issues, to manage, to troubleshoot queries, to make sure you create power users who then become evangelists of the situation. And so I think there's a lot to learn from how technology transformation has already happened, and really start applying them. I can think of three or four things. The first is, for companies and brands not to think of just the IT buyer, or the person who's investing in technology as their customer, but also to think of end users, and take them into the fold. The second is to create IT leadership within educational institutes itself. I mean, a company has a CIO, a CTO. Who is the equivalent of that in an educational institute? And it's sometimes difficult to identify that person. Maybe it's time for educational institutes to start thinking of hiring leadership that can drive IT for them. Or if they already have people who are competent to lead this function, how do they start seeing their roles of as not just IT implementers, but also to partner with companies like ours to create these learning and training opportunities for children, for parents, for teachers to get not just trained but then certified and encouraged to take on more. I mean, it is become a vital skill. There is no doubt about that. And I mean, I may say something that's a little more provocative, so please, you know, pardon me if you do not like it. But uh, earlier we had, we've always had this degree which says B.Ed, Bachelor of Education, and I don't think that's that is super relevant. But maybe that it's now time for a B.Ed Tech, where how technology gets integrated is just seamless, and it's just at the heart of it. So and that would be a requirement. I mean, if you look at the national education policy, again, it attempts to put technology at the heart of change and not driven by pandemic, and rightly so. So yeah, I mean, I don't think there are any easy answers, but two things. I think there is inspiration to be had from companies that have led digital transformation successfully. So how do we learn from those entities? And the second is to build IT leadership, technology leadership within the institute itself.
Yeah, no, very interesting points. Very interesting points, Amit. And I want to go back to also and reinforce what you said about technology as a service, because this also goes to Sona Singh's point on the chat that everything comes for a price, and schools have also been struggling financially for a
Yeah.
year and a half at least, and spending extra on technology becomes a problem, and which is where I guess technology as a service helps in ensuring that that investment doesn't have to happen all upfront and can happen more like a monthly ongoing cost. But equally, I see that as going very hand in hand with making people comfortable, because when technology is a service, then the vendor doesn't just dump hardware in your office and go away. The person is there as a partner, providing the solution and providing the training and support on that on an ongoing basis. So that's something that struck me as you were speaking.
You're right about that, Ramya. And technology companies like ours have the responsibility of not just bringing devices and solutions, but
Hmm.
also to, as you said, drive adoption. So break it down, make it easy to adopt, make it easy to use, make it accessible. And the more we drive that, the greater are the chances of success. And to make sure that it goes into more institutes, it goes into more homes, it goes into more educators.
Sure, sure. Uh, Amit, let me go now into a couple of the areas of technology use in a little more detail. So, one, coming to school management, because a lot of people with us today are school leaders, either principals or coordinators, or some people from school management, etc. So, when you think about managing a school and administration, what are some specific things which you have seen becoming more effective or more efficient with the use of technology?
As I said, there are some things which are unseen, and you will, like, for example, you don't, uh, you don't value security till security is breached,
Hmm.
and therefore, that is the foundation of any IT investment that you make. Those are some unseen investments, but they will make sure that you have a robust solution and a sustainable solution to manage learning and ensure continuity. That's really important, because I mean, think of a security breach, or someone making an unauthorized entry. It could actually bring learning to a grinding halt. I mean, it's a threat that one had never thought of, never seen in an education kind of a scenario. So that is truly important. The second is really, it's going back to engagement and therefore learning outcomes. How do you ensure that children of any age, including college students, are really engaged and connected. I mean, look at the number of meetings and calls that we do in companies today, and how many of them are we really, really, truly engaged in. And if as adults, as grown-ups, we're not really engaged with so much that's happening through the day, how do we expect children to be? How do we expect students to be? So I don't think technology can provide answers to everything. I don't think technology can provide answers to that. Technology can enable it, can aid it through the use of software, assessment instruments, through quizzes, through how lessons are delivered, immersive experiences. We're also starting to now use VR and AR experiences in some markets. But but there really needs to be out of box thinking to go along with technology. And I truly think it's like a feedback loop. We learn, if we understand what is it that you're really trying to do as an educational institute, it helps us build solutions, and when we build solutions, it helps you teach better. So I really feel, Ramya, that very little really has happened in terms of conversations also between educational institutes and IT companies. And what you're facilitating today is truly remarkable, because on one end you could see this as another, and I'm being very open about it, you could see this as a company plug, a brand plug, where I'm coming to on Lenovo's behalf and talking about Lenovo's portfolio of devices and solutions. But the other way to look at it is that it brings us all in a step closer to having a dialogue, to having a conversation. It's lovely to see live responses from the audience on what do they. I mean, I've not seen it. I've spoken to my teams about it. You can go to people, but this is like real live feedback. We need more of it, and the more conversations happen between IT companies and educational institutes, both benefit.
Wonderful. No, glad to hear that, Amit. And which your comment about security made me come to Ashok Kumar's question, which is that this whole thing about unwanted elements entering a classroom online has become a fairly big issue now, or is starting to become a big issue. Now, when you think about an integrated technology solution, are there pieces of security that can get built into that technically? And obviously, I'm not expecting that we'll get into the technical details right now, but is it possible for people to actually learn how to build security into the online sessions, etc., so that this doesn't happen?
Oh, 100%. And I will again not go into too much of technical details, but one has to understand that security is also not a unidimensional topic. Security has many dimensions. So, and at Lenovo we call it DIOD. The first D is for device. How are your devices protected, both at the educator's end and at the student's end? Because threat can emanate from there. The second is identity. What about your personal data? What about your personal identity elements, and how do you make sure that they're protected? Uh, the third is online. You are constantly on the network. What kind of threats can emerge in the online network, and therefore how do you need to mitigate that? And finally, data. There is going to be tons of data that's going to move around in a hybrid classroom. One needs to look at what's that data like, how is it getting managed, how is it getting stored, how is it getting used, and how is it getting, let's say, disposed of responsibly when it doesn't need, it doesn't have use. So security is again a multi-dimensional problem. It's not a simple problem to look at. It's not like buying a piece of software and everything is covered. It's not as simplistic as that. And what we really try to do is, we not only have our own solutions, but we also have tie-ups with a lot of other brands who are experts in their own field. So what we do is, we sit down with the educational institute, we understand the requirement, and then we ensure that we then find the right suite of solutions and software for them to address their, it is not a one size fits all, because requirements are different, the size of organizations are different, the methodology of teaching may be different, the budgets may be different, what you can afford as an educational institute can be very different. So it again needs a tailored approach.
No, I think, and your constant emphasis on a tailored approach is actually quite encouraging for school leaders. I feel from whatever I have heard from school leaders, because I think the attempt to basically come and land a product on the table is something that school leaders face a lot in today's world, and understanding their problems and the particular situation becomes an important thing. Uh, Richa Gupta, you have said when children are taught through chalk and board, they take down notes, they focus more, and holistic education can take place. And I don't want to dispute that at all. So, in any of these sessions related to technology, I don't want to suggest that any of us at CENTA feel that technology is a replacement for the physical world in education. I think we are basically trying to do two things here. One, that in the current situation, it has become inevitable for us to use a certain amount of technology. And how do we use it well? And second, in any situation, there are certain things that technology can do distinctly better. And that is not necessarily the replacement for the chalk and board. It could be many other things. And I'm now going to ask Amit about one such thing, which is data analytics. And you also alluded to it, Amit, in your opening remarks. What are some kinds of analytics that you have seen schools use powerfully through their tech solutions, which can be relevant, whether pandemic or no pandemic? So, what are some of those analytics?
Some of the most straightforward ones are things like assessments and and assessing continuous learning. There can be probes, there can be dipsticks to understand how are students learning, and then you can keep a tab on that. The second is about responsible usage of internet itself, and how do you make sure that children who are connected, it's not just the responsibility of the parent, but it is a shared responsibility that the educational institute can also take, and make sure that you keep a responsible watch on what is getting consumed, and are they getting exposed to content that they should not be getting exposed to. Finally, engagement. That's really the operating word, I would say, because that's the real bridge between your input and a learning outcome. And engagement is a really, really complex problem. How do you break this down into multiple signals? What kind of signals can tell you that the student is engaged or not engaged? And again, some of the software and solutions that we offer, without getting into too much of detail, help you identify those signals, and then make sure that you're getting a very, very easy to read report, easy to read dashboard that tells you how is it that you're able to really engage your classroom and hold that audience together. So these are the two, three things where we've seen uh, a lot of use directly by educators, and I'm not talking about IT leaders and IT decision makers and teams that are managing IT, but
Hmm,
educators who are using technology creatively on a day-to-day basis to run their
sure.
classrooms.
Sure. And which brings me to Shard's question from Mumbai, Shard Khatib from Mumbai. And I'll ask a slightly modified version of your question, which is, if a school wants to keep its student data completely private and not share it with the technology company, is there a way for them to create logins and so on at the school level alone, and not and keep the student data to themselves without the company having that access? Because privacy becomes one of the big concerns both for the school and for parents.
So that's a very specific question, Ramya. I will maybe abstain from giving the answer only because I'm sure our solution can address it. But I'm not the in-depth technical expert
Sure,
at giving the answer.
sure.
But
Yeah.
I'm happy
And
to. I mean, if
yeah,
if the gentleman can drop in a note, I'm very happy to connect them with our education expert and take that query on.
Wonderful, wonderful. Yeah, and Shad, of course, if I read behind your question, there are obviously different purposes that different companies have, and in some cases, it is true that companies are actively trying to build a student database, even as they are in touch with the school, and that's what your question is partly alluding to. But specific requirements around privacy, I do feel that many of the big players are able to address in different ways, depending on the particular solution. So going back to the analytics, Amit, there are two questions from one from Anki on any particular tools that are relevant for assessment, and a question from Debjani on whether foolproof online exams are possible. And I'll ask you the question, and maybe after your answer, I will also add to it, since this is one area where we do a lot of work as well.
So Ramya, I mean, these are very, very specific ones again. So I would, why don't you start and then maybe I'll add on.
Sure, sure. So Anki and Debjani, so there are, broadly speaking, two kinds of assessment tools that you could be using in whichever class, lower class, higher class, etc. One is what we think about as tools for formative assessment, and these are tools like Mentimeter, which you saw right now. All of you experienced it. And Mentimeter just happens to be a tool that we use, but there are many such tools which are available. If you're running a Zoom classroom, Zoom has its own polling tool. This chat window itself in most softwares is a good tool for formative assessment. So there are many tools of this kind which are available for formative assessment. Now, the coming to the summative assessment or foolproof online exam, high stakes exam, as Debjani asked, the biggest issue in summative exams becomes not the assessment tool, where again you can use any tool, but the proctoring or the online invigilation. And it is important to recognize that online invigilation is not going to be 100% foolproof, because the technology is getting better and better as we speak. So many of you may be aware of the CENTA teaching quotient test for teachers, which happens through online proctoring, and our teaching professionals Olympiad finals, which also happen through online proctoring now in the pandemic. And the technology keeps getting better in the sense that if there is somebody else in the room, it is detected. If the person is looking here and there, then it is detected. If the person is saying something, it is detected. But the tool has its limitations, because it is possible that you are just stretching your neck and looking somewhere, and the tool says, oh, you moved your eyes away from the window. So there are limitations of that kind, and therefore it requires a combination of the technology system and human proctoring, which is what we do. So combined technology and human proctoring is what we do for more foolproof online exams. And of course, it's never 100% foolproof, but I think it starts getting close when we do that. But again, without getting into too much detail on that, I think Swaraj has also commented that practical training is needed on online teaching and such areas. And as CENTA, by the way, we offer an online teaching training pretty much every month, which you can find on our website. But let's not, we won't talk about that today. Let me come back to Amit with one more question, which is, Amit, with respect to communication with parents, students, teachers, or communication among all stakeholders, what is the, what do you feel is the role of technology, both in the current situation and otherwise?
So is your question about the role, role of technology in communication among parents and, I didn't get the question very clearly.
Sorry. So when you think about parents and teachers interacting on a regular basis, And
Right.
in today's environment, it's also teachers and students interacting on a
Mm,
regular
mm,
basis.
mm.
Then, and probably parents and students have too much interaction. That's a different matter. But when you think about interaction among the different stakeholders, what are some solutions that you find technology providing which can make this smoother or more effective?
Hmm. So, I mean, if I understand you right, I mean, today I'm sure teachers and parents are communicating with standard modes of communication, whether it's email, WhatsApp. I'm sure it gets difficult or complex for teachers to sometimes address so many, could be so many queries, multiple queries, especially leading up to assessments, etc. Look, for communication, there are many tools that are available. And again, I go back to if I look at companies in which through which communication has happened for years through multiple modes of technology usage. All of that I think is available. What I think needs to be done, perhaps, I would look at the non-tech side of things. How does earlier you had this situation where a child would board a bus, go to school, and for those 6 7 hours the parents really not involved in learning, or and then of course they're following through. But now you have a situation they're equally involved as stakeholders. That to me is the big shift. The technology I think comes second, and therefore how do you evolve that culture between, within an educational institute, involve parents, make sure that they know the space where they communicate, they know where is it that they need to be less anxious. Is there a certain you had the parent teacher meetings, now you're talking about interactions on WhatsApp and email, and these could be parents popping into classrooms. So it's suddenly become an extremely complex social environment. And I really feel that technology can. I don't think technology can solve it. Are there solutions available? Of course, there's solutions available. But what we need is, I don't want to use the word protocol, but I think that there needs to be like new forms of social contract, new forms of social etiquette when it comes to interaction. I mean, a lot of people would have experienced it also in a healthcare context right now, when thousands of people are let's say suffering from COVID. They cannot walk into a hospital. Earlier you had a doctor patient communication that was always face to face. Suddenly everything's moved to tele, and the moment it moves to tele, access improves. So for a patient, the patient feels that the doctor is always available on WhatsApp, but the doctor is not available when you're talking about their mind share and their time. Now that's a that's a completely new social contract. How do the doctor cannot say I will not respond, but the patient cannot expect that the doctor is always available at the touch of a button. So I think it's more a social situation uh, to manage. There is a piece of code that can be written for everything, but this one first needs to be solved for, and then I'm sure technology can follow.
Yeah, no, I think that's wonderfully put,
And
Amit. And
again,
in fact,
Ramya, this I'm speaking purely as a parent, and making large leaps of belief with this feeling that I'm sure educators are experiencing complex social situations.
no, I think you hit the nail on the head, Amit. And in fact, when I again, go back to our the online teacher training that I was mentioning, this is a very important piece that comes up, which is what is your protocol in communication with your students as well as your parents. And technology doesn't solve for that at all. So depending on which technology you are using, the protocol needs to make sure that on one hand you are having enough interaction, but on the other hand it's not like a parent is interrupting the class every few minutes. So that protocol becomes a very important thing. So totally agree with you. Last thing, Amit, before we wrap up, and thank you so much for being with us today and sharing all your inputs. I'm also seeing lots of people on the chat saying that they found the session extremely informative. So that's great. I think the feedback link has been shared about 15 minutes back, and it will be live till tomorrow morning. So please feel free to fill your feedback when you can. But last thing to Amit before we wrap up, which is that uh, you are also, of course, the technology partner for CENTA Teaching Professionals Olympiad, and of course you're partnering more because of your interest in education. So, love to understand what is it that made you get into this partnership, and what do you think could be the impact of this?
No, first of all, Ramya, I think I've got to, tried to understand as over a period of time, got to understand CENTA a lot more deeply. And I really respect the purpose that you have come to stand for and the dedication and the authenticity with which you drive some of these conversations. I've also been a part of many forums, many education related meetings where, one sees a lot of opinions, but very little data, very little research, very little engagement to back it. And that's what has impressed me about CENTA the most. And we think teachers are a critical link between. It's not as simplistic a problem where brands can build technology and educational institutes can execute technology. Teachers are a vital link in that, and we come into this association with not just not just with a deep sense of curiosity to understand this space and our stakeholders much better, but also to genuinely contribute as much as we can to the evolving situation. And right now, I mean, maybe it's hard to believe, but a lot of initiatives that we're taking in education are not with a very specific end in mind, because we feel that we're still at a very early stage of really learning and understanding how this category and industry is evolving. And we just believe that if we learn and we're listening to teachers and educators and institutes and students and parents all the time, we'll just be better at building solutions for them.
Wonderful. And it's very refreshing, Amit, to hear that from a global major like you, because I think in this sector many of us are used to tech players coming in and saying, "Look, this is how you need to do something." So to hear a global major saying, "I want to listen to teachers, listen to principals, to students, to parents, and see what can work." That is extremely refreshing, and really glad about that. For people who are asking about the code and the feedback link, it was posted a while back, and let me just request my colleagues to post it again. Yeah, it has just been posted again. Uh, and there is no code for today. Okay, so this is like a surprise exam where sometimes you have a code and sometimes you don't. So today there is no code. You can just click the link to the form. And somebody who hasn't received your participation record for the previous webinar, request you to please drop a mail on team@centa.org, team@centa.org, so that it can be addressed. So once again, Amit, thank you very much for taking the time and being with us today. And thank you to all the principals and other school leaders, teachers, management who have joined us from all over India and some beyond India.
Thank you so much, Ramya, for a really thought-provoking conversation. I have also noted quite a few questions that came from you and that came from those who are listening in to think about. So I just don't, I hope I've been able to contribute, but I go back so much richer. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.